Hi, welcome to our presentation about macroeconomic strategies for low-income countries in Latin America. We are Nina, Franca, Hannah and Petra, and we will try to explain you as much as we can in this short 10-minute movie. In these 10 minutes, we will present our research statement, clarify some definitions in order to make everything a little easier to understand, introduce other macroeconomic strategies beside neostructuralism, we will present our case studies, and we will show our data analysis on these case studies. And we will answer the question why Bolivia and Nicaragua are underdeveloped at this stage at this particular time. And finally, we will conclude everything we told you, and then we will present our discussion statements for the further discussions that we will have. Our research statement for this video is: neostructuralism is the best macroeconomic strategy for low-income countries because it targets not only economic growth but human development. We base this on data we collected about Latin American countries.
Here are some definitions. First, Latin America. What is it exactly? Geographically, historically and culturally, it is all the countries in South and Mid-America which were colonized by the Spanish or the Portuguese. Second, what is economics? Basically, it is the production and consumption of and by the people. It is also about the science of money, how money is a construction used to be able to keep the economy running, and finally, how human choices are the drive behind economic growth and fall. Third, low-income countries. What is exactly meant by that? The World Bank states, for the current 2017 fiscal year, low-income economies are defined as those with a GNI per capita of $1,025 or less in 2015.
So, now let's take a look at low-income countries in Latin America. When doing research on this, it came to our realization that there are no low-income countries as classified by the World Bank in Latin America. From the list provided, you can see that the majority of the low-income countries are actually located in Africa. This means that at this moment, there are no countries in Latin America that have a GNI per capita of $1,025 or less. So, the next category of economies are classified as low-middle income countries. Here we begin to see the appearance of Latin American countries. According to the World Bank, low-middle income economies of countries are defined as countries with a GNI per capita between $1,025 and $4,035. The countries listed as lower middle income are Bolivia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Paraguay. We didn't think that these countries listed came as a surprise. Due to the majority of the countries having an economy dependent on agriculture, rate of economic growth is slower than the more diverse and industrialized economies. Here is a graph presenting the GNI per capita for low-middle income countries that we have established in the previous slide. In 2015, Nicaragua had the lowest GNI per capita of $1,940 and Ecuador has the highest of $6,010. This brings us to our case studies. This presentation will focus specifically on the low-income countries Nicaragua and Bolivia as our main evidence to prove our research statement that neostructuralism is the best strategy for low-income countries. Now that we have clarified the definitions, established our countries of interest, I will now briefly explain and justify why other macroeconomic strategies are not as effective as neostructuralism. Mercantilism existed from the 1590s to 1800s, and it was a state-led, export-orientated strategy with a restricted market that only benefited the colonizers. Although it allowed for some growth that, however, cannot be statistically proven, it also resulted in deep exploitation and lack of independence for the colonies. The liberal macroeconomic strategy, common in the 1800s up to the Great Depression, was an export-orientated model that included ideas of free trade, comparative advantage, and the development of primary product industries. Although a better alternative to mercantilism, its impact was the emergence of the Creole and growth was still slow. The structurist model achieved significant amount of growth, more so than the previous macroeconomic models implemented. Its main ideas involved that of the import substitution model. Although quite an effective model, too much state interference and the following of the lost decade led to a questioning of this strategy. Neoliberal strategies existed after the lost decade and implemented free market thinking and were export-orientated. This period is also known as the era of the Washington Consensus, which only focused on economic growth, disregarding human development, therefore not a good strategy for low-income countries.
Neo-structuralism was officially implemented from the 90s onwards, but in most countries started only after 2000. It is often called the post-Washington Consensus because it was a reaction to the neoliberal reforms. They started to focus also on human development instead of only focusing on economic growth, for example by paying attention to poverty. The main points of neo-structuralism were: first, growth with equity and democracy. Growth with democracy means the reintroduction of some individual rights that were taken away during the neoliberal period, like labor rights. An example of growth with equity is more government spending on social programs, such as the conditional cash transfers. The second main point is the importance of institutions to maximize participation in globalization. This means more government intervention in the economic process. For example, government action to help to enhance the competitiveness of the export markets.
We think neo-structuralism is the best macroeconomic strategy for low-income countries, based on the data we collected. We will analyze this data in the next slide and show that the development in the broader sense increased in Bolivia and Nicaragua when neo-structuralism was implemented.
It is evident from this graph that major growth has taken place after 2001, which we can justify as due to the implementation of neo-structuralist strategies. From 1980 to 2001, the neoliberal period, growth actually decreased significantly over a few years. Therefore, we can state that neo-structuralism has had a positive impact on the growth of Bolivia's GNI per capita. In 2005, the GNI per capita of $1,030, Bolivia was alleviated from the term low-income country. Likewise to Bolivia, major growth in the GNI per capita started in the 2000s. Growth between 1980 and 2001 proved stagnant and slumped significantly more than Bolivia. Such a deep slump was also due to political instability as well as social issues that defined society of that time.
Not only is measuring economic growth an important indicator, but so is measuring human development. The Human Development Index is a composite index that measures life expectancy, education rates, and per capita income that indicate the level of human development in a region. Measuring other forms of development as well as economic progress is key to understanding the correlation that exists between progress on a social level and growth economic-wise. This graph presents the growing increase in HDI for both countries. HDI has increased from 15 to 20%. This graph presents the poverty headcount ratio at national poverty lines for both Bolivia and Nicaragua in terms of percent of population. Although data is only available from 1999 onwards, there is a trend of a decrease in the poverty headcount from both Bolivia and Nicaragua.
As you can see in the graph, the export of goods and services in Bolivia and Nicaragua increased after the year 2001. During the neoliberal period, they also focused on exports, but during the neo-structural period, the government increased intervention in promoting and helping the export markets and companies. This pie chart shows the income distribution of the lowest and highest 10% of Bolivia in the year 2000, before the neo-structural policies were implemented. The lowest 10% of population only holds 0.13% of the total income of the country, compared to 49% held by the highest 10% of population. The next pie chart shows the income distribution 13 years later after the new structural policies. Compared to 2000, the share of the lowest 10% increased almost 0.8%. This maybe doesn't seem like a lot, but the income share of the highest 10% decreased with almost 15%. This shows that the middle class is increasing. So, when you look at the data we just analyzed, you can see a lot of improvement of the overall development of the two countries. But these countries are lagging behind compared to high-income countries on issues such as poverty and income distribution, even though it increased a lot the last years. The fact that they lag behind on these aspects may be holding back the overall development of these low-income countries at this particular time.
Through the range of data provided in this presentation, neo-structuralism has proved to be the best macroeconomic strategy for low-income countries. Since its implementation, poverty and income inequality has decreased, and GNI per capita, human development, and exports have increased. By targeting poverty as one of its main features, this strategy recognizes that social and economic progress go hand in hand. From the data provided, there seems to be a correlation between economic and social progress. From this, we can say that in order for an economy to be stable and successful, society must reflect that. With low-income countries, diverse social problems are more prevalent than in high-income countries. This strategy, out of all the strategies mentioned earlier in the presentation, has statistically shown the most progress. We hope that you have enjoyed this presentation, and remember to take a look at our discussion questions on the following slide to prepare for our next tutorial.
Our discussion questions are: first, the neo-structural policies included increased state intervention with the export market, but wouldn't it be better if private firms were to make the export market more productive instead of the state? Second, because of the neo-structural policies, export increased and so did the prices of goods. Do you think this is beneficial or non-beneficial for the purchasing power of the people?